Welcome back to Everyday Elevations, the podcast where we transform ordinary moments into extraordinary outcomes. Today, I'm very excited because we have a special guest on the show today. His name is Patrick Alonso. He's a licensed pharmacist and the host of the Men's Health Unscripted podcast, but he isn't your typical healthcare expert. He works more as an advocate for men's health, kind of similar to how a financial advisor works as an advocate for monetary gains. So with that, I don't want to give too much of your story away here, Patrick. I'd love to, for those who don't know you, give yourself a little bit of an intro, talk about your background, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Sounds good. So thanks for having me on. First and foremost, it's an honor to be here and be able to kind of talk to you. I know you've had a health journey since kind of talking off camera, and it's always great hearing people's adventures and just like how they've bettered themselves, whether it be mental health, physical health, and all that stuff. So thanks for having me on.
Of course, I'm excited. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about yourself. Obviously, I gave the standard shell of a biography on you, but I know people want to learn more about you personally.
Sure. So I am a licensed pharmacist, a consultant pharmacist here in the state of Florida. I can do some telehealth things outside, that might come into play a little bit later. But for the most part, like my licensure is here in Florida, and it will be expanding, I think, soon, hopefully. But the main thing I would kind of want people to know is that I am not like your typical pharmacist. I don't sit behind a counter all day. I actually have an office. I work one-on-one with patients, and I'm more so of a healthcare advocate. And what that means is kind of like you said, you have a financial advisor for your finances. Some people have a lawyer for their legal stuff or business things. And so I'm kind of that bridge in the healthcare field. And a lot of people find the healthcare field is difficult to navigate, confusing. There's a lot of paperwork. People get kind of caught in the hamster wheel. They've got multiple doctors, and this isn't a burn or saying anything about doctors or different healthcare providers. It's not what I'm trying to get at here, but a lot of the systems don't speak to each other. And so you have great doctors, but some of them have blind spots where their electronic health record might not be able to transfer over to your other doc's electronic health record, or you got care in a different hospital, or there's a lot of different reasons why they might not cover or talk. And then the other aspect is America is the number one prescribed nation in the world. And we have so many prescription medications out there. We have some great drugs. We have some trash drugs. Everything, I think, was created with some good intent to really help people kind of hone in on their health. And my goal as a healthcare advocate is to, help people get past all the weeds and get out of the hamster wheel so that they can really focus on their health. So I help people take away all the stressors and, contacting doctors, trying to get their health information organized and things like that. And then the pharmacy comes into play as a lot of my clients have a lot of supplements and medications. And I can't tell you how many times this interview that we're doing, this desk that I'm interviewing on, has been full of bottles, whether it be supplements and pills and all kind of stuff. So it's really helping people kind of show what do you need, what do you not need, what questions to ask. And just overall, I'm kind of their bridge to anything that they need in the healthcare system. I'm here to help with that.
Love it. So as soon as you mentioned all the pill bottles, memories popped in my head. So I used to help my grandma and grandpa out and live with them for a little bit. And oh my goodness, the amount of pills just my grandma alone had was insane. It was probably, she'd have 30 pill bottles a day and taking prescriptions multiple times a day, just sitting there. And of course, in my back of mind, I'm like, there's no way this can be good for any human being to have this much medication in their system. Without going into too much detail, she had overdosed multiple times due to the medication and other things, I'm sure, as well. But having the medication she had wasn't very helpful. It's kind of one of the reasons why I was excited to talk to you, because I was like, this is an out of the box type of conversation that I wouldn't normally have or get an opportunity to have, because I wouldn't even think to ask in like a Facebook group or anything like that, where podcasts, you typically meet people up on those, like Need a Guest and whatever 1,800,000 different ones they have.
Right.
But that's why I was so interested in this conversation, because there's so much that we don't know. I'm a firm believer that here in America, it's interesting. Growing up, it used to be throw some dirt on it.
Right.
Right? Like we used to get, you got a scrape, throw some dirt on. Oh, you have a headache, throw some dirt on. Whatever. Get some, what is that? Vapor rub, Vicks Vapor Rub, whatever. Like whatever little random thing like your grandparents or someone would say to you, right? And then now it's like, take some pills. Here you go. Here's this meds. It's like, man, how did our society get to that point? So again, that's why I'm excited to chat with you, because I personally want to get smarter on this. And I know people in my audience will definitely want to get smarter on it. So it's exciting to get these tips from you. So
Sure.
I kind of went on a huge tangent there just because I was excited to chat. But with that, when you had mentioned the fact that there's so many clients who come to you and put all these bottles on your desk, like, how do you, when you deal with a client or just in general, how does someone know when maybe they shouldn't be taking these meds? How is it, like, what can they look for? How they can get this information and maybe make a more educated decision rather than just listening? And it's not to take away from the doctors. Doctors do the best they can. But me personally, I found they diagnose the symptom. They don't fix the problem. So they give you a medication. And maybe I'm wrong. I apologize to any doctors who might be listening in on this. I know a lot of you are amazing. Most of you are. But yeah, nonetheless, it's one of those things that's kind of like my personal take on it. So how would you help somebody with that, like in terms of advice?
So I kind of want to get to the root cause of this first. And then I think explaining that will kind of explain the rest, right? So let's think about what we, what we consume. And this isn't necessarily talking about food and drinks and things. When you watch TV, do you see drug commercials? Absolutely. Right. I mean, I don't think there's a TV channel or TV station where you can't watch a show for 30 minutes to an hour without at least seeing one drug commercial. So that's kind of one aspect, right? The United States, and I've heard this is changing. So it used to be the United States and New Zealand were the only two countries in the world that allowed drug commercials. So that's a fun fact. Now I've heard that there's some countries in Europe that are actually allowing drug commercials. I believe Germany was one recently that somebody came, told me, I'm from Germany, I've started seeing drug commercials. So those are a couple of things to maybe think of. What are you being marketed? What are you being sold? Right. And then that's just direct to consumer marketing. There's drug advertisements and commercials and other avenues outside of TV, but you guys kind of get the idea. Then if you want to talk about, well, now you have a doctor who constantly gets bombarded by drug reps. Well, drug reps work for the company. They're not necessarily pharmacists or healthcare professionals or anything. They work for the company. They've been trained to talk about one or two drugs, maybe more. And so they have some expertise in these medications. But they're, at the end of the day, they're kind of salesmen or saleswomen, right? Usually they're very nice looking. They're, bring food or lunch. And so the doctor's office is kind of constantly under bombardment to prescribe and under this type of marketing. And so we're all kind of being marketed to one way or another. And that's cool. I mean, that's business, right? Like everybody's got to advertise. In the sense when it comes at the expense of people's health, potentially a little bit greedy. I'm not afraid to say that sometimes, or a lot of times, big pharma can be pretty unethical in some of the things that they do. And PBMs are pharmacy benefit manager. We could probably have a whole podcast on PBMs, but they're very opaque with how they delegate price and cost. They say they save you money on medications. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of irons in the fire. Let's kind of keep it at that. And so it's kind of like a root cause of why there's a lot of prescribing going on. Then next, we have our general consumerism as people, right? You go to the doctor, you expect to have something from it. You pay into insurance, you pay copays. I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into this, and having a doctor, a healthcare professional say, you have the flu, it'll resolve in 7 to 10 days, like you'll be fine. They don't necessarily want that. They want something. They want something that's going to make them feel better now. So it's partly our fault just as consumers. So that's, number 2. And then we get to number 3, where once you actually have the patient and the doctor establish a relationship. So this is all of the stuff before is pre-established relationship with provider patient. now you have an established relationship, and the patient, they get their blood work or they have some kind of symptoms to have a diagnosis. Well, unfortunately, if that doctor is kind of on the insurance model, that doctor might not have the ability to spend more than 10 or 15 minutes with a patient, right? I mean, that's just kind of how the insurances want them to operate. You have a very quick in and out. And I think a lot of people have that experience. You go to the doctor, they call you back, they take your blood pressure, do whatever they have to do. You see the doctor for 10 or 11 minutes. Like, what can you get done in 10 minutes? I mean, it's so difficult to catch up from your last visit, especially if you've had diagnostic tests and all these other things kind of happening in between. So it's just, there's a lot of finite windows that we all have to operate in. And so that's where, what's the quickest way to resolve something? Sometimes it's, I'll write you a script, or we can get you set up for this procedure. Or there's different avenues of attacking different health issues. And sometimes it's hard to really talk to patients and say, okay, well, what's really going on, and really getting to the root cause of someone's issue. So if they have, the best, really easy example is somebody who had a heart attack or some kind of cardiovascular issue. When you're sitting there on the table or you're in the doctor's office, a lot of times they have to treat you like a heart just sitting there, and there isn't this whole person. What got you the heart attack? What got you to this point? Or what got you close, and maybe we can reverse it? Those type of things. Those conversations are really hard to have on the model that we are currently operating on. It's very difficult to have that full scope wellness conversation. And then finally, patients will finally get prescribed something potentially, and then they feel like they're having side effects from whatever drug that they're on, or maybe a drug disease interaction, and they go tell their doc or a different doc that they might have and say, hey, this drug's really giving me these side effects. But they kind of determine that maybe they really need that drug. The problem is, and this is like first rule broken of pharmacy, like pharmacists, right? This isn't maybe always common knowledge outside of our profession, but it's not always great to treat a side effect with another drug. And that's really where people end up in the hamster wheel. So I kind of said all that to just say, a lot of people will get on that. This is just the impact on our brains and how it translates to finally the doctor-patient interaction where they get prescribed something. And so it's very easy to offer a patient a medication or some kind of solution that would seemingly happen pretty quick. And they'd much rather take that than dive into the root cause, or they just don't have time, or they don't even know where to start. So that's kind of really why I think a lot of this has happened, why prescription drugs have taken such a front seat in the healthcare system, is partly because Big Pharma has the money to lobby and get in there. And I'm not saying I'm completely against medications. I think they're great, fantastic tools to help patients get to their health goals. However, I feel like there is an over-medication problem where, like you said, Jason, your grandmother, there's pill bottles everywhere, right? And they're just all over the place. And as a pharmacist, like, I can help somebody keep track of those for sure. But as an average person, half my clients come in and they're like, I can't pronounce this. I don't know when I was prescribed this. I don't even know why I take this anymore. So getting them in a place where they understand healthcare, they understand their drugs, and then we kind of start diving deeper. Well, why were you prescribed that? Oh, was it to fix a side effect of this? And you kind of start realizing. And so that's one really great way to know whether you need a drug or not. Were you prescribed the drug because you had a side effect, or were you prescribed the drug because you actually had an issue with a disease state? And so you start to find that one drug might raise your blood pressure. So you get another drug to lower your blood pressure. And then people just end up in these really nasty wheels, and it really becomes tough to get them out of it. It's possible. It depends how long a disease has progressed. It depends how long they've waited, what kind of treatment they've had, and all that. But it's definitely possible to get people off drugs. And so that's not always the solution. But minimum effective dose is kind of like my sweet spot, as in my practice.
Gotcha. That makes sense. The more you talked about it, the more I was just thinking about personal experiences with my grandparents. For instance, my grandpa went down that hamster wheel. He started treating other symptoms. He was taking, I forgot what the medication was. He was on blood thinners first and foremost for God knows how long. but it had been good 30, 40 years of him being on blood thinners. And then he started getting this itchy skin, like near towards the end of his life. He had it for like the last 2 years. And so they started giving medication for that, and that caused other issues. The medication was hurting his liver and kidneys. And I was like, man. So as soon as you mentioned that hamster wheel, I'm like, yeah, he was treating side effects of other things, and those pills were creating more side effects. And he started adding more and more pills onto that. I was like, this is insane. And I always said, I was like, this can't be healthy. There's got to be a better way. But I just didn't know what that would be. So it's interesting to hear you talk about and just be so open, just because of the fact that there's a lot of people who go down this hamster wheel.
Right.
So,
and there's knowledge gaps there. And a lot of my business is just creating education for people and then having them understand what's going on. And then the light bulb goes off. And then what you really see is a lot of the confusion and stress starts to go away. And as you probably know, I'm sure your listeners know, like stress is a killer alone, right? And that it dysregulates your endocrine system. It doesn't let you sleep. I mean, there's all kind of issues just with stress and the stress that we put on ourselves. And a lot of times diseases can be not necessarily it's all stress's fault, right? But stress can lead to overeating, sedentary lifestyle, and these type of issues that get Americans in like chronic metabolic disease state. But the problem is that you're dealing with a stressful job or issues at home, and all these other things compound. And it's so tough to then, after all of that whole day that you've had or that whole week you've had, sit down and eat a good meal and go for a run or go lift some weights and things like that. And it's so much easier to just kind of like hang out, drink a beer and sit on the couch, right? I'm not saying that's for everybody, but these are kind of things that I usually see where it's just it's an easier way. And there are ways that you can feel perceived stress reduced, but they're actually kind of creating more stress. And so it's just really tough. And so when you kind of start to navigate the healthcare system and kind of I'm really helping my patients catch up to the doctor's level, so that if the doctor has only 10 minutes, then we get to have some additional conversation after, or I can help coach them I come with them to their appointments if they'd like. So then I can ask the questions, or I coach my clients on what questions to ask so that they better understand what they're kind of working with, rather than, hey, you got this disease, here's a prescription, see you in 3 months. Right. And that's a lot of times how that ends up.
Okay. I like that. That's interesting, actually. Well, I love the fact you're educating them so they can come in more prepared for these doctor's appointments, because I know myself, I go in clueless. I'm also a pretty laid back guy, so I don't really worry too much about it until eventually I'm going to have to. But it's one of those things where I think it is important that what you're doing, just helping them understand a little more what's going to happen with the process and how they can get more out of it. Because you're right, we get very little time in the doctor's office. I spend more time waiting for the doctor to come in than actually talking to the doctor. Right. I typically talk more to the nurse than I do the doctor, him or herself. So as soon as you mentioned that, I started laughing. I was like, in my head, I was like, yep, this checks out. Right. I get it. Again, insurance plus, timing, amount of patients, things like that. There's different variables that come into it. It's not that they're just trying to quickly shun you off. There's just they're trying to help to the best of their capability and what they're allowed to help in that moment. So yeah, I don't want to make it sound like I was earlier trying to badmouth them either. Just to be clear, like I've had plenty of good experience with doctors. I understand that their job is not an easy job.
Right. I'm just trying to help kind of elevate the patient. The way I like to think of it is like I'm helping the doc, because now you have a patient that's on time, ready. They have all their medication lists. They have their past medical history. All their health information is there and ready for them to analyze and look over and input into their system. And what I've noticed that allows them to do is that instead of the doctor going and trying to scramble and find information, it's all there. So we can come in and actually get a few more minutes with them, because you have someone that's prepared and on time and ready to, and already kind of pre-educated for the visit. And so they're kind of ready to have a discussion or ready to kind of follow up on whatever happened in the past. And so that's really where I feel that, I've enjoyed so much in my job. And kind of like you, I had a relationship with my grandparents that was probably a little bit different than a lot of people. Like some people have parents and, my mom went through a bad divorce. So my grandparents really picked up a lot of the slack to help her while she had to go to work and do those things. And I noticed the same thing. I mean, once my grandfather had one health issue, and he was a pretty healthy guy for the most part into his 90s, but he had a health issue. And then all of a sudden the medications just start pouring on. And you learn in pharmacy school, like certain diseases, there are certain cocktails of medications that kind of go with that disease. And then I started noticing that he was feeling really bad. He had some duplicate medications. So one of his doctors was still on the paper system. So no electronic health record. And this was years ago, right? This is a while ago. So it's not, we're not like yesterday or anything, but there are still doctors on the paper system. We're not going to call anybody out. But then there's also, his other doctors were kind of a little bit more updated on computers. So there's this huge disconnect, right? And so one doc prescribes one thing, one doc prescribes the same thing under a different name. He starts to feel really bad. Hospitalization happens. And I'm just looking into it. This is before pharmacy for me. I mean, this is before any of that. I'm still an undergrad. And I just realized, hey, these names are kind of similar. What are we doing? And turns out he was prescribed two of the same med, just under a different name. And that's kind of something that can happen, right? And then same thing, kind of very similar happened to my grandmother, except I was kind of already in the pharmacy role and was able to advocate for her more. And I realized, man, a lot more people need help. And this isn't just isolated to my family. I mean, I'm in the pharmacy working, and there's people coming and asking the same questions and having the same issues. And this is where it really gets this is kind of my villain origin story, I guess, where I'm, in a pharmacy, and I'm realizing that I'm answering all the same questions, and I'm kind of dealing with the same stuff that my grandparents were dealing, and realizing this isn't in isolation. This just wasn't my family. This is a lot of families. And so I left that and to start this practice so that I felt I could make a difference. And then also really just advocate for my profession of pharmacy. I want to prove that we are a lot more than kind of like hiding in a basement in a hospital, verifying your meds, or sitting behind a counter at a big box pharmacy. We have a lot of skills. We leave school with a lot of skills. If you do residency, you leave with even more skills. If you do fellowship, those kind of things. And so, or just how you practice, right? And when you have so much training, education, and a skill set that can help people, but you're confined due to the healthcare system and insurance and all that, it kind of takes away from how we feel about ourselves as pharmacists. And I want to change the way people think about pharmacists and not just immediately think, oh, you work at CVS or Walgreens or Rite Aid or whatever. And a lot of people don't even know that there's pharmacists in the hospital hiding in a basement, you know what I mean, trying to verify their meds and make sure that there's safe dosages and all that kind of stuff. So I want to get the information out there that pharmacists are really valuable in the healthcare system, especially with how much medication people take and supplements. I mean, you can go on and on with all the fixes people are trying to find in or out of healthcare to make themselves feel better. That's really just, it makes me so happy that I get the opportunity to do that for my friends and my colleagues in the system, because, one day they might have a new place to go work or be able to touch people's lives in a different way.
No, I love it. What you're doing is amazing. It's obviously, it's incredibly helpful. And this is the first I've heard of anybody doing this. I'm sure you're not the only person doing this either.
I'm not the only one, but I think I'm the only pharmacist. And that's where there's a difference. I don't know. I mean, in a different state, there could be. I haven't really researched too much about competition. If there's people out there trying to help people get healthier, cool. I'm happy for that. But, as far as I go, I really think I'm the only person, at least in Florida, or at least my area, that is a pharmacist and also advocating. There's other pharmacists that are entrepreneurs, and they'll have their clinics and things like that. They do functional medicine stuff, but I'm still ingrained in the healthcare system. People pay a lot of money to be in the healthcare system, and to have insurance and to, for their drugs and all kind of stuff. And I'm trying to make that system work better for them. I'm not going to change the system. That's a huge overhaul. There's a lot that goes into that, right? I'm not here to change it. I'm just here to make it work better and more efficiently for everyone who is my client.
Nice. All right. Well, so I think we got plenty of tips off of that, especially the key tips were just really paying attention to what you're getting prescribed for. That's my biggest takeaway is look into what is being prescribed and why. So
don't be afraid to ask questions too.
Another good one. Yeah. Don't be afraid to ask questions. So sweet. What I want to do is I know you have your Men's Health Unscripted podcast. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that and just kind of have a little convo around that, what inspired that, as well as what are some of the things you talk about there and some of the other topics that excite you. Because I know this is a huge part of who you are, but I know there's more to you than that. And we've talked offline and figured that out pretty quick. So yeah, tell me a little bit about it.
Sure. So I appreciate you asking. So first and foremost, I'll say like the healthcare advocacy and the pharmacist aspect of me. If you want to think of me like a mullet, that's like the business on top. So it's the mullet haircut. It's a business on top. Men's Health Unscripted is like the party in the back. That's where we have fun. We have a podcast, like we are educating guys about health and wellness and just different modalities of health that might not be typical. We do like to have doctors on. So, recently we had a functional medicine doctor on. We've had urologist on. We have a cardiologist coming up pretty soon. But what we like to do is kind of just have these doctors who have such knowledge and expertise in these fields talk about how it impacts men. Because as you probably know, guys don't like to talk about their health. Guys definitely don't like to talk about their mental health. And a lot of men just in general will kind of wait until their arm is falling off before they go to the doctor or the hospital or something. I mean, it's like really got to be a significant issue. And we found this, we started doing this type of work when we were in pharmacy school. It was about 6 years ago, pre-COVID. And we started like a little group at our pharmacy school because at our school, we kind of had to do extracurricular activities and we had to just do different things. And so we're like, well, all the current activities kind of suck. Let's make a fun one, right? We can make dick and fart jokes, for lack of a better term. We can have fun, but still be serious and still, educate people on health. And what I noticed so Cam's my co-host on the Men's Health Unscripted podcast. He's a nuclear pharmacist and works crazy weird hours. And he's got a pretty interesting job, and also he's a Marine. So he's got a really interesting perspective on this. And I'm a healthcare advocate and a former college baseball player. And we've kind of realized that a lot of guys they don't care or they just brush it under the rug. And what we wanted to do was have some fun. There's, a little bit of guy, locker room talk, I guess, that goes on, but nothing like really bad. But it's us being ourselves. We're kind of, the pharmacy hat is kind of always on a little bit. It's just part of who we are. But we kind of try to take that off and ask questions that maybe the average person wouldn't know, or even things that we don't know. I mean, we don't know everything. And we're pretty open about that. And I would say that we've learned so much from the podcast because our audience is pretty interactive. Our guests are pretty interactive. And we've just learned so much about what people want and what people are looking for. Over the podcast will be 4 years old, right around the middle end of May. I always forget the date. It's like in the 20th something, but and so we really just try to have an educated conversation for men. And what happened was we first started just talking about metabolic disease, so like high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke, those kind of things, the things that pharmacists deal with a lot. And as we got out of school, we started realizing that our audience was talking about men's mental health, relationships. What I want to be vulnerable, but the last time I was vulnerable with a partner, she used it against me. And now my feelings were turned on me. I mean, there's real things that guys talk about and they're deep conversations. And sometimes we, not all the time, but sometimes we make some jokes, right? I think all guys can kind of laugh at themselves a little bit, and we laugh at ourselves all the time. So this isn't like us pointing fingers, but I think what the big thing about the Men's Health Unscripted podcast is giving a lot of guys an outlet to ask questions. We're healthcare professionals, so we're trustworthy. and at least we think we are, right? But what we try to do is just, if it's something that we can't answer, we find a guest who can answer. And I think that's what's really important, is finding people who have had an experience in life. So it's not just a professional. I mean, we've had cancer survivors. We've had, all kind of people on the podcast that just tell their story. I mean, we've gone from things as dark as like, male sexual abuse, which never gets talked about, and, male abuse in relationships, where like, where does a guy go? You see a lot of, women's shelters, but where does a guy go if they're abused in the relationship, right? I mean, other than maybe getting laughed at. What are some mental health resources for guys? What's the suicide hotline? It's 988, by the way, if anybody's wants to know. I mean, if there's a crisis line, 988. And so we're just trying to find resources for guys, and it's just evolved into this really fun, interesting project with hundreds and hundreds of hours of content that we feel like, and it's still growing. I mean, we've never touched all the subjects, and we're not sure that we will. I mean, there's so much niche information for men, and it's all really just built on having fun, being accountable for yourself, and, just being the best man that you can possibly be. And nobody's telling you on our podcast. We don't ever tell anybody how they should live. We hit diet a little bit. It's not like this huge diet and lifestyle podcast, because a lot of people get offended and angry about their diet, and that's fine. We just want people to do what makes them feel good. And we just try to seek out different modalities that maybe a lot of people have never heard of, and give them that option. Reach out, figure it out. And it's really turned into a lot of fun, where we have a great audience. They're really interactive. Some people have said it's like almost cult-like. I don't think it's like quite that far yet, but just giving a guys a place to open up, talk about it where they feel comfortable. And I'll tell you one really quick story is in 2022, we were at a car show doing like, we just had our tent, like a setup, a tent. We had stickers, we were giving stuff away, just more like a trade show environment as a car show. A lot of military there for whatever reason. And this Army guy comes by and he's like, "Oh, you guys are what?" We tell him Men's Health. We're Men's Health Unscripted. We have a podcast. We talk about men's physical and mental health. And he's like, "You guys are talking about men's mental health? That's awesome." And that was the first time we heard that. And we'd been doing men's health work for years before that. And every time we'd set up at a car show or somewhere where there's a lot of guys they're like, "I don't want to talk to you. Screw off. Like, get away from me." And more times than not, it was their sisters or their wives or girlfriends or whoever telling them, "Hey, go talk to those guys. Like, they're here for men's health." And it was more so the women in their lives forcing them to kind of come and have conversations with us. So it was really refreshing for just a guy to come up, military guy, toughest of the tough, right? Come up and say, "Man, that's really awesome. It's really needed." And that was kind of a huge turning point for us.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I think nowadays, and by the way, I'm prior military myself, so I can totally relate to what he's saying. There wasn't, especially when I was in the military, it was still a little taboo to talk feelings and things like that. So I know that was a little bit of an issue for me. I couldn't really, I shouldn't even say that I couldn't, because I had therapists who I talked to here and there, but like it was hard to be vulnerable when you were trying to balance being a leader, not showing weakness, not understanding that showing vulnerability isn't weakness, it's actually true strength. But when you're in the military, you think, "Ooh, strong like a bull, never get scared, never get upset, no tears. You're a grown man. You go kill people for a living." Well, at least that's what people think military do.
Right.
But like, so when you going out there and doing that, it makes perfect sense that somebody would come up to you, especially a military member, saying, "Hey, this is amazing." Because the truth is, even to this day, it's gotten a lot better.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is, but I mean, then like we were getting no listeners, and we couldn't tell anybody. I think there was a period of time where we actually had more women listeners than guys, which is hysterical. It was like very early on. And I think part of that was we had Dr. Tara on. She's like a sex coach. A lot of her target audience is kind of women, but not like it's everybody, but she just attracts who she attracts. But, we had her on, and it was neat because a lot of girls would reach out to us and be like, I didn't know this stuff about guys. Like, this is really interesting. And then it eventually kind of like guys started to catch on. And I think guys started to really realize that they can talk about it. And like you said, showing vulnerability isn't a form of weakness by any means. And really, at the end of the day, I mean, what we found is like, hey, if you're in a relationship and your partner's using your vulnerabilities against you, might be time for a new relationship. But I'm not here to tell anybody how to live again, but that's kind of how it is. I mean, you can maybe try to change it or try to figure something out, but if it continues to happen, it's really not healthy. It's pretty toxic. So that's kind of it was so weird just doing the podcast and starting to get hit with these questions that we never thought of. We never thought were issues with men, just because it was never discussed. And I know we have our own problems as guys, just Cam and myself. And there was some stuff that we were maybe a little bit ahead of the curve on with our emotional health and mental health, just because Cam and I had both gone to therapy and done a lot of mental health healing modalities. And I think a lot of guys had never taken that step, so they never knew what that appointment or what that even looks like. And I think that's where we really kind of started to see like, man, there's a real problem. If guys can't open up about this stuff, if guys are in their own relationship feeling stuck and they don't really feel like, I mean, this is a side note, but not really a side note, but there's a huge friendship epidemic that men have. Even before COVID, but COVID made it worse, where guys over the years have claimed to have had less and less close friends that they feel like they can have an important discussion with outside of the superficial, typical cars, chicks, sports type conversations that guys are known for. A lot of guys say they don't feel like they have somebody to reach out to. And I think that it would be so important for maybe our podcast, maybe some other men's health modality to really lock that in and let guys know, maybe you do have somebody that you can talk to, but you just don't know because you've never said anything and you're in your own brain. And so kind of getting guys out of that rut to where they can go seek out therapy. And we even say it, therapy's not for everybody. There's a lot of different modalities out there. And maybe it's not that therapist. I mean, you have to go try a few that can identify with you, right? You might have to run through a few before you can find somebody that can really help you and understand. And so I think that's another issue too, where guys they'll go to therapy once or twice. They're like, this person doesn't get it. They think all therapists are the same, and then they drop out. And so it's kind of letting them know that sometimes you got to toe dip, sometimes you got to trial and error. This medicine thing it's called practicing medicine for a reason, right? Like we're not, you're not always playing or perfecting medicine. So that's kind of what we wanted to do. And we've just listened to our audience and what they want to know about. And there's times where we get a DM or an email and we're blown away. We're just like, dude, this is crazy. We got to help this guy, and we got to see if we can find out a way to get a guest on or to find some answers for him. So there's a lot of issues that guys are going through. It is getting better. It is changing, but we are far, far away from a real, like true men's kind of wellness all around, like just being activated. I don't know really how even to describe it, but we're a little ways away.
Oh yeah, 100% agree. But made good headway. So it's important that it's getting better and it's less taboo to talk about it. But no, I love it. I've managed to listen to a couple episodes. I want to listen to more from your podcast. It sounds like you guys are doing amazing work, and it's super important. It's cool that you're getting all the feedback too, because a lot of times what happens is people might get 5-star reviews here and there, but they're not getting that real, genuine feedback. So the fact you have people reaching out, asking for help, saying, hey, this helped here, it's huge. It means you're doing something right. And that's what's important here. You're helping somebody. If you help one person during your podcast, it's already a success. So that's amazing. So congratulations to you. I love it. But with that, we are getting a little close to time here. So I always like to leave it open if there's anything else you want to discuss. And then from there, I will just ask a couple ending questions I'd like to ask. So if there's
Sure.
anything, any tips or anything you want to give before we wrap this bad boy up, just please go ahead.
Sure. So I think that the top tip that I probably see or kind of talk to people about the most is, I guess, making sure you're getting enough sleep. This is like kind of the pharmacist coming back. Make sure you're getting enough sleep and make sure you're getting enough quality sleep. There are a lot of different ways that you can kind of do that, but that's like probably for a different podcast. I mean, there's whole aspects on sleep. We're coming out with like a full sleep course to kind of help people understand the processes. A friend of mine who's a behavioral health coach and myself. And so I'm kind of covering the pharmacological and supplement aspect, and she's kind of covering more of the behavioral health aspect. So that'll be probably coming out next month. But, make sure you're getting enough really good quality sleep, turn off the TV early, get off the phones and things like that. And then really just eat good quality food. I think that's kind of something that we get off track of. And I know this is something that's really important to you too, like in your health journey. Jason's like making these changes. So those are kind of the big things. I mean, you can resolve a lot of issues by just getting good sleep and eating good quality food. You don't need me. You don't need, a lot of this other stuff if you can kind of lock those two things down. And then just for the guys out there listening, we've already said it, but do not be afraid to be vulnerable. You might have to pick who you're vulnerable with. Now that's important, but do not be afraid to have a vulnerable moment. Do not be afraid to call and ask a friend if they can just hear you vent for a few minutes about it, because the male suicide rate is actually, I think it's up to like 79% now. So of all successful suicides, men are 79 to 80% of those. And that's like kind of after COVID, which COVID did a number on our mental health, probably as a global society, not just America, but, really try to find some people that care about you. If you don't or think you don't, you probably have somebody in your life that does, but really try to find that and have a group that you can share with, because it will make that group's bond grow so strong. And, you can still always have the fun, cool conversations, but just know that like you have people that got your back, because these suicide numbers for guys like have to go down. It is alarming, the violent intent that guys take to take their own lives. And that's something that's super important to me as a man, and super important to our podcast as Men's Health Unscripted is like really helping guys with their mental health and realizing that there's a different way. Like you don't have to take your own life.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a couple friends that did that. So it's important to talk about and understand there's avenues to help yourself. There's always somebody who can be there for you.
Yeah, Cam, my co-host, we had a spot on the local news last year for, I think, Memorial Day, I believe. And when he was in Afghanistan, I think he did 1 or 2 tours in Afghanistan, never lost anybody. When he came home, 6 of his friends committed suicide that he had served with. And he lost more people at home than he did actually in combat, which is alarming and disturbing. So, and this isn't just directed towards the military folks. Like this is for everyone. So if there's trouble, I mean, Jason, I'm not sure if you provide resources, but we do. So hit us up, somebody, Jason or myself, like, we can make it happen. We'll help find you some really great resources. SAMHSA has a great mental health resource, and they help people find therapists for, throughout your budget. Like if it's low income or anybody, they'll help you find the healthcare professionals that you need. So, I mean, there's a lot of really great resources out there that I think people just don't know about. We know about it because we get directed to them as healthcare professionals. So we're just trying to get that information out there to people.
Gotcha. Up until this moment, I haven't really talked too much about it, but yeah, I definitely want to make sure that I'm giving more resources out there. So thank you. That's
Sure.
huge.
I'll email you
a
some.
little bit more to my mission. Yeah. Yes, please do.
For sure.
So with that, let's hop into the questions here.
All right.
One of my favorite questions to ask, it's if you could be known for any quote or have something written on your epitaph to explain who you are as a human being or even who you want to be, what would that quote be?
So I think that quote would be in the sense of like, how when people say like, oh, I want to be careful not to cross the line. I like to use that line as a jump rope. And I mean that in the sense of sometimes I have to kind of say maybe controversial things. Like today I said, Big Pharma isn't really looking out for your best intention. That's a profit-driven business. So some people are like, whoa, you're in healthcare, man. You can't be saying that kind of stuff. And it's true. I mean, look at the numbers, right? Like it's there. But sometimes I do say controversial things, and I don't hold back because I feel like I need to share that information with people so they understand that, yes, there's an aspect of it that's looking out for your health, but there's also an aspect that's looking out for their profits. So figure out what you're being sold and kind of see, are you being sold something or do you really need this for your health?
Okay. No, I love that. That's actually a good quote. I was not expecting to go there. So that's one of my favorite part about that question is I've never had the same quote twice. And there's always a story behind every person's quote. And I love learning about it. It's just fascinating. The way people's minds work is fascinating to me. So
Absolutely.
Hearing how someone answers that is so much fun. But with that, here is my next one. It's also one of my favorites to ask. If you could either have a superpower, well, let's start off. So what would you consider to be your superpower? And the follow-up to that is there a superpower that you wish you could have? And it doesn't necessarily have to mean X-Men superpower or anything like that. But of course, if you want to go that route, more power.
Right.
Who doesn't want to fly?
Yeah, laser eyes would be pretty cool. But I would have to say my current superpower now, I think my best superpower is really being able to talk and relate with people and have good, in the healthcare system, we call it having bedside manner. So being able to relate to people, even if they're outside of my age bracket, kind of intake information for what they need and really work with them and tailor fit things to help people, and giving them realistic goals that they can kind of achieve. I think that's really my superpower, is just being relatable. And a lot of my clients, like, they have come to the office and they usually leave and they're like, it's so great to talk to you. Like, it's just so much fun. And so that's kind of how I want people to feel about me, whether you're hanging out with me, on the weekend, or you're my client and you're coming in to get some good health information. I feel like that's probably where I excel best at right now. I would also say I really love building teams, and this probably goes back to my baseball days where I coached and I played and all that. But I love seeing a team come together and accomplish something big. So those are probably my two favorite things right now. I'm working on building the team for this business, but those are just so much fun and really my favorite things to do. And then if I could have a superpower, I'll say outside of probably fantasy superpowers, because there's so many great ones, but maybe a real life superpower. That's interesting. I would, that's a great question. I think a real life superpower, I wish that I could probably read and absorb information faster. Like, I feel like I'm pretty fast at it, but if I could Superman a book and just zip and understand everything in it, I think that would be pretty sweet.
Gotcha. So basically do like the Flash where you can power read and retain everything. Yeah, that'd be. So you see, you mix a little fantasy in there. So we pepper that in. Oh, no, that makes sense. Actually, I never would have thought of that. That would be kind of cool.
I mean, I could go on.
So many books I want to read.
Yeah, I'm I'm kind of a huge comic book nerd and stuff too. So, flying, invisibility, Wolverine's healing power, Deadpool's sarcasm. I mean, all of it. I wish I could have all of it, right?
Sounds like we got to do a whole nother podcast episode just on characters here.
Right.
Because I'm a big comic book guy myself. So
yeah.
That's why I like ask that question, just because it's a lot of fun. It can go any which way. Some people say, oh, I want to fly. Yeah. I mean, personally, I'd rather teleport. Maybe Nightcrawler.
Right.
I'll get there quicker. But it also depends how you answer it. So if someone says they want to fly, like, it's because they want to see the world from a different perspective. Cool. That's beautiful. I still want to teleport. So, but nonetheless, yeah. Before I go off too much a tangent here, that was really the main question I want to ask. I always like to have a little fun with it. It kind of just gives different perspectives on things. So with that, where can people find you? So this way, if they want to reach out to you, maybe even reach out to your podcast, listen to that, where can they find that at? Things along those lines.
Sure. So Men's Health Unscripted, the podcast, is available on pretty much every platform that people listen to podcasts, like Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, iHeart, anything. I think pretty much I think we've tried to cover everything. So we're on all those. If you can't find us on a platform that you like, let us know, because I'd like to know about that. And then probably our most prominent social media is Instagram. That's where you'll get like the most diversity of kind of what we're doing. So that's more of like where we're out in the public and more doing a lot of that stuff. But we have Facebook, YouTube, all those, and that's a lot more podcast driven and focused rather than like we'll make fun educational videos that go on our Instagram and sometimes a TikTok. But there's a lot of social media. It's like kind of hard to keep up with all of it. And you can find us at www.menshealthunscripted.com. That's where you can see where we're going to go, be in public. If you want to ask us questions, all that kind of stuff, it'll guide you to us. And then to find me on my business on top part of the mullet, on Instagram, I'm your pharmacist, your advocate. And you can also find me at www.tampahealthadvocate.com. And that's where you'll be able to reach me through email. So that's the primary ways of getting a hold of me. And anybody who, whether it's telehealth or in person for the healthcare advocacy business, everyone gets a free 1-hour consult or a medication review. So I'm not going to just say, hey, you got to pay me money. Like, I want to see if it's going to be a fit and if it's actually something that can benefit.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you for giving all the info. I'm sure you're going to get people reaching out to you. I mean, you get it every day anyhow, but
Sure.
Hopefully some of these listeners are like, hey, this is a great opportunity. I learned a lot today. And they reach out to get you a little more business and heck, who knows, maybe get you on more podcasts. So,
Sure.
With that, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be on here. And I want to thank the audience here. Thank you to everyone who's going to eventually be tuning into this episode when it's released. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate if you could hit that subscribe button and leave a detailed review. I want to know what it is that you liked about the episode and maybe the information that you would like included in the future for episodes. And also just check us out on Instagram at Everyday Elevations for some exclusive content. We do our latest updates on Instagram, as well as I like to give a peek behind the scenes of my personal growth journey and the things that are coming up on the podcast itself. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for sharing your audience with me. And it's definitely been an honor to be here. I know you've had quite the health journey yourself, and I think that's what's so awesome about your podcast.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. Have a wonderful day.